Bertelsmann Foundation is involved in the organization of this conference. Why is better regulation so important for the Bertelsmann Foundation?
Well, we have been working on better regulation for at least 3-4 years now. The reason is really that a lot of our mission as a foundation centers on the question, how can society be sustainable? How can it be effective in the future? And regulation clearly is one of the most important levers that really translates political ideas into action. If it's well done, we can hope for good action, but if it's not well done, or if it's done in a very costly, inelegant way, then there's a high price to pay. So it's one of the biggest levers, and that's why we need to address it.
Brussels has been described as the world capital of regulation. Of course, it's a suitable place to hold such a conference. But how do you feel about the regulation in general in Europe so far? Do we have too much? Is it a burden, or can it play another role?
Well, first of all, one has to recognize the huge complexity that a European union of 27 member states has to face. Regulation in Brussels means it's multi-actor, but it's also multi-level. So we have all kind of pathologies or problems of transposition, of gold plating, of executing. So that's first of all the challenge. It's a challenge of complexity. So it's not enough to say less regulation or more regulation. The question is, how can regulation be effective and done in a good way? And I think that challenge is the one that we are most interested in. It really leads to the question, what is an architecture of regulation that reaches down to the citizens and the businesses, so people see the impact of what's being done. And frankly, today we can, I think, soundly say a lot of what is happening now doesn't reach the citizens yet, which puts a lot of attention to the fact that a lot of citizens don't believe in the value of Brussels, which is, from my point of view, a big mistake.
One of the people trying to address that is Commissioner Verheugen. He was here this afternoon at the conference. He had a very frank discussion about what he feels is wrong and what he thinks can be done successfully. What did you think was the most interesting part of his presentation?
Well, I very much appreciated that he was very honest when he said better regulation is a part, it's not everything. Unless one also addresses the administration, one is jumping too short in terms of framing the debate. And I think that is a very important point to keep in mind, that we need a framing of the debate on better regulation that goes beyond just the tools and techniques of better regulation, addresses also the question, what's the purpose of the regulation, and eventually how do you enable the people who need to administer eventually, or design and administer the regulation down the road.
Verheugen said he was very surprised to see that a small group, small lobbyist group, companies individually can have an influence on regulation in Europe. How do you feel about such a forthcoming statement from a European Commissioner?
Well, first of all, I liked his way of posing the question, because he said if he had one wish, it would be he would like to know who initiates any regulation, because he says it's not transparent, it's not clear. I think it's a very practical issue here that we have to address. How do we get transparency on the influences in the whole process of regulation? And in the debate in the symposium, I think was very clear. We need to make as early as possible in the process open who creates inputs in the process, but also open that process early on for consultation, so that at the end of the day, not only those who are very powerful and have the means can influence, basically at the very last point of the process. So I think Verheugen is right on the point. We need more transparency on the process, but also create easier means of access to provide input in the process.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I'm quite sure that the theme of better regulation is not one that will go away with one symposium. I think it's a long process of optimization that's still ahead of us.